In this video, we are going to learn how to compare fractions. First of all, let us consider the case in which both fractions have the same denominator. Let us consider an example. Let us compare the fractions 1 divided by 4 and 3 divided by 4. Now we can see that both fractions have the same denominator. Both of them have the denominator 4. So let us consider a diagram to understand how we're going to compare these fractions. Now let us consider a rectangle, and let us divide this rectangle into 4 equal parts. Because we have the denominator to be 4, we're going to divide the rectangle into 4 equal parts. Now consider the first fraction. We have 1 divided by 4. So it's 1 divided by 4. So if we shade just one of these parts, that will represent 1 divided by 4. And if we consider the next fraction is 3 divided by 4. So 3 divided by 4. To represent that fraction, we need to shade a total of 3 parts. Now if we do that, we can see that 1 divided by 4 is less than 3 divided by 4, because when we have 1 divided by 4, the portion of the rectangle which is shaded is clearly less than the portion of the rectangle which we shade when we represent 3 divided by 4. So what does that mean? That means that 1 divided by 4 is less than 3 divided by 4. So if we have the same denominator, what we do is we just compare the numerators. In this case, we have 1 over here and 3 over here. Now 1 is less than 3, so when we shade just one part, that is obviously going to be less than what we obtain when we shade a total of 3 parts. And because of that, 1 divided by 4 is less than 3 divided by 4. Next, let us consider the case in which the two fractions have different denominators. Let us consider an example. Let us compare the fractions 2 divided by 5 and 7 divided by 10. We can see that the first fraction has a denominator of 5 and the second fraction has a denominator of 10. So the denominators are different. Now how do we compare these two? What we do is find a common denominator. So we are going to use the concept of equivalent fractions for this. Now in the first fraction, we have a denominator of 5, and in the second fraction, we have a denominator of 10. What we need to do is find a common multiple of these two numbers. Now note that 10 is a common multiple of them both. But 7 over 10 already has 10 as the denominator, so we don't need to change that fraction. But 2 over 5, we need to find an equivalent fraction in which the denominator is 10. So what do? Now we have 2 over 5, and we want an equivalent fraction in which the denominator 5 is 10. So how do we go from 5 to 10? What we do is we multiply this by 2. And since we want an equivalent fraction, we need to multiply the numerator by the same number. So we have 2 times 2, that is 4, and 5 times 2 is 10. So we have 4 over 10. Now what we have is the fraction 4 over 10, and we also have the fraction 7 over 10, and we need to compare these two fractions, and the denominator for both of them is the same. So what do we do when we need to compare fractions with the same denominator? What we do is we compare the numerators. So note that the numerator for the first fraction is 4, and the numerator for the second fraction is 7. 4 is less than 7, and because of that, we will have a less than sign over here. That is, 2 over 5 is less than 7 over 10. Now, one thing we need to remember is that we can use any common denominator. So we have 5 and 10 over here. We can use any common multiple of these two numbers. We can use the number 20, we can use the number 30, and so on. We can still compare the fractions even if we use any other common denominator. But usually we use the least common denominator to make our calculations simpler. Now let us have a look at a few practice problems. Let us compare the given fractions. Now in the first problem we have 2 over 6 and 4 over 15. Let us have a look at the denominators. We have 6 and 15. Now these denominators are different, so we need to look for a common denominator. That is, we need to find a common multiple of 6 and 15. Now 30 is a common multiple of these two numbers. So let us change these fractions into equivalent fractions with denominators as 30. So first of all, we have 2 over 6. Now, how do we change 6 to 30? What we need to do is multiply 6 by 5. And we want an equivalent fraction, so we multiply the numerator by that same number. So we have 2 times 5, that is 10, divided by 6 times 5, that is 30. Next, we have the fraction 4 over 15. Now, what we want to do is change 15 to 30. How do we do that? We multiply 15 by 2. And we want an equivalent fraction, so we multiply the numerator by that same number. So what do we end up with? We have 4 times 2, that is 8, divided by 15 times 2, that is 30. So now what we need to do is compare the fractions 10 over 30 and 8 over 30. We can see that the denominators are the same, so all we need to do is compare the numerators. And we can see that the numerator 10 of the first fraction is greater than the numerator 8 of the second fraction. So what do? We put a greater than sign over here. That is, 2 over 6 is greater than 4 over 15. Now, let us move on to the next problem. Now, in this problem, we have the fractions 5 over 6 and 20 over 24. What are the denominators? We have 6 and 24. They are different, so we need to find a common denominator. That is, we need to find a common multiple of 6 and 24. Now, 24 is one such number. Now, 20 over 24 already has 24 as the denominator, so we do not need to change this fraction. But we need to change 5 over 6 into an equivalent fraction with the denominator as 24. So what do we have? We have 5 over 6. And we need to change 6 to 24. How do we do that? We multiply 6 by 4. And we want an equivalent fraction, so we multiply the numerator by that same number. So what do we end up with? We have 5 times 4, that is 20, divided by 6 times 4, that is 24. Now we need to compare the fractions 20 over 24 and 20 over 24. And we can see that they are both the same. So what do we have? We have an equal sign over here. That is, 5 over 6 is equal to 20 over 24. They are equivalent fractions. Now let us move on to the next problem. What fractions do we have over here? We have 2 over 8 and 7 over 10. What are the denominators? They are 8 and 10. So the denominators are different and we need to find a common denominator. That is, we need to find a common multiple of 8 and 10. Now 40 is one such number. So let us change our fractions into equivalent fractions with the denominator as 40. So we have 2 over 8. What we need to do is change 8 to 40. How do we do that? We do that by multiplying 8 by 5. And we want an equivalent fraction, so we multiply the numerator by that same number. So what do we end up with? We have 2 times 5, that is 10, divided by 8 times 5, that is 40. And the next fraction is 7 over 10. What do we want to do? We want to change 10 into 40. How do we do that? We do that by multiplying 10 by 4. And since we want an equivalent fraction, we multiply the numerator by that same number. So what do we end up with? We have 7 times 4, which is 28, divided by 10 times 4, which is 40. Now we need to compare the fractions 10 over 40 and 28 over 40. They have the same denominator, which is 40, so all we need to do is compare the numerators. Now we can see that the numerator 10 of the first fraction is less than the numerator 28 of the second fraction. So what we do is write a less than sign over here. That is, 2 over 8 is less than 7 over 10. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. See you next time.